Good afternoon and welcome back everybody to this closing session. Building on some of the very critical issues that had been raised in the meeting yesterday, you all participated in a total of 4 deep dives to this morning and to this afternoon, which discussed in more depth some of the main issues and challenges that had been raised over yesterday. So we would now like to hear back from these deep dives. And we will go in chronological order. First, going back to the sessions that were organized this morning. And then we will hear back from the 2 sessions that had taken place this afternoon. We had heard yesterday how important it is to reframe the power dynamics of knowledge creation and sharing, a very important challenge for the ASEAN project. So I would now like to ask the leads of session 1A, strengthening networking knowledge sharing and capacity building for scaling up agroecology, which had addressed issues around networking and knowledge sharing, to take the floor and to share with us some of the main messages and also recommendations going forward. Can I please ask Lucy Raynaud and Sasireka Rajendran to come in?
Hi, Dr. Katinka. Thank you so much for giving this opportunity to present the wrap-up. So I'll just take some moment to share my screen. I hope you all can see the screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
We can see.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. So I'll be presenting this wrap-up for session 1A along with Ms. Lucy Raynaud, General Coordinator for ASEAN. So our session dealt with strengthening networking, knowledge sharing and capacity building for scaling up agroecology and safe food systems innovation. So we had 3 different parts of the session. One was on research and development, and the other was on capacity building, and the third was on available knowledge resources. So the first part had 2 speakers. One was Ms. Mary Ard, and then Doina presenting from IFAD. And the second speaker for the session was Ms. Femi. And so first speakers, they highlighted strengthening enabling environment for community-driven agroecological transitions, where they highlighted cost-efficient community-driven implementation and the importance of investing in grassroots implementation with the help of digital innovation, and invest in dissemination and peer learning to scale out. And there is also this investment, we should also be investing in human and social capacity and education. And they also stressed the importance of collaborations and co-investments with value chain and finance. So with that, we now, what we had heard from Ms. Femi from NTFP was the power of local initiatives, knowledge exchange, and networking towards sustainable food systems in Asia. So she really highlighted the way how NTFP was working and recognizing the local initiatives and local communities. And she stressed that enhance, restore, and protect indigenous foodways is one of the important ways to really acknowledge the local communities. And we should continuously update knowledge on traditions, cultural systems, and practices, including rotational farming, gathering, fishing, trapping, food gardens, and cultivation. And the final takeaway from her presentation was fundamental complementary work and support to indigenous people and local communities to secure and protect their collective land and territories to sustain their culture and way of life, including their foodways and agroecological practices. And the second part we had was on capacity building, where we had 3 academicians presenting innovative approaches in e-learning and online teachings. So the first presentation was on academic initiative and transdisciplinary learning and teaching for agroecology and sustainable development program. So in that, we saw about education for sustainable development approaches that needs to be strengthened in higher education, and link outputs of implementation projects with higher education curricula, And at this, we also stressed, like they also covered what has been included in their newly updated academic curricula, and what chapters on agroecology and safe food system has been covered in their initiative. So that was one of the discussions. And on the other two speakers, they spoke about Bosque Canal Conservation Agricultural Service Center and the e-learning initiative in Cambodia. So here we see that the Bosque Canal Conservation Agricultural Service has maintained its long-term continued CA experiments over 17 years, and it still has been continued in that region. Partnership, they stressed and they felt that with their experience, they really felt partnership is a key to success. The partnership includes between government, donors, private sector, research, education institutions, and NGO. And then from ITC side, we also saw how they were including e-learning approaches and how they've been evolved into using the online system for teaching as compared to the previous years. So here ITC converted all ITC course into online content, and they also talked about Moodle, an online free resource that could be accessed by everyone. And they also shared their work experience with EMCAST to develop science, technology, engineering, and mathematics teacher training online learning materials. They also highlighted the collaboration with RUA and CIRAT to develop agricultural content, host regional content on agriculture. And finally, coming back to the knowledge sharing part of our session, we had two very interesting presentations that demonstrated the practical use of the apps, farmer-friendly apps also, I would call it that way. So one was on WorkArt and the other was on EcoCaseker. So first, we learned from Dr. Albrecht what is WorkArt and how they collect the data and what are the useful resources that are available in the WorkArt. So WorkArt is a world overview of conservation approaches and technologies. It's a global network that has been established in 1992. And they developed a set of standardized tools and methods that are now used in over 50 countries around the globe. It also supports the compilation, documentation, evaluation, sharing, dissemination, and application of knowledge on SLM. And finally, on the final presentation, we had EcoCaseker web app that is farmer friendly, where farmers could upload the video content in the app and they could share their experience. They made it in such a way that they don't need a Gmail account. All that they need is a video to be recorded and uploaded to them. And they have also given trainings to them on how to do that. And I think it was really so good to also they also had the subtitle in the video. So the farmers prefer to make their own video, and they invest to identify what is best tech solution also. And digital marketing to increase the number of users at relatively low cost is also being explored. We could use it in a web browser or even in the phone. And supporting farmers to produce videos on agroecological practices as well. So these are the few summary of what we saw in session 1A. Now I request Lucy to present the key takeaways from our session. Lucy, over to you.
Thank you, Sasi. So in brief, yeah, thank you. In brief, those are takeaway message coming from the discussions this morning to the important to pay attention to institution capacities and network partnership, but also to those new form of cooperation where exchange between different stakeholders from different backgrounds can encourage innovation, being capacity to test and adapt at different contexts, but also the important to design interactive and tailored tool to target audience and to the context, and not the opposite, the tool adapted to the content. And as we mentioned, that there we highlight that farmers really want to make their own informed decision and not having automatic generated recommendations for a top-down approach. Next, please, Sasi. And finally, to conclude, as a key recommendation, we come up with 4 recommendations: the importance to enhance co-creation of knowledge through respective reflexive practices and approach to elaborate co-solution together that are adapted to the local context, and the importance of promoting and going through multi-stakeholders processes without leaving behind the farmers' communities. The need also to invest in learning and dissemination through peer learning, extension, and tailored tools. We highlighted once again the importance to better connect agroecological knowledge communities with the high education curricula to integrate agroecology into university program for the next young generation. And finally, we noticed as a recommendation and taking measures that there is an increasing interest and action from the development communities and research community to find concrete ways to enter into policy dialogue and to achieve meaningful policy changes towards agroecology and food system. Thank you for your attention. This is all for session 1A of this morning.
Thank you very much, Lucy and Sasi, for firstly the stock taking on what worked really well, but then also drawing recommendations from that for further consideration of the ASEAN project team. Very useful. Thank you. Good. With that, we now move on to session 1B, which was around innovation. Yesterday, we had seen that innovation is essential for agroecology transition, and also that it is a strategic intervention area in Vietnam. That was one of the examples we discussed yesterday. So could I please ask the session leads, Melanie Blanchard and Erika Wu, to come online and to share the presentation with us, which I see is already on the screen.
Thank you very much. You already saw the presentation for the wrap-up. It's okay?
The presentation is online, yes, and I hear you.
Okay, thank you. So we will make a wrap-up of the presentations, but also the discussion from this morning for the session 1B on agroecology and safe food system innovations and their scaling out at local level. So the observation widely shared by all the stakeholders is that the diversity of agroecosystems in the regions are not longer sustainable, but in the same time, there is a strong demand from consumers and stakeholders for an improvement of the quality of agricultural products with concern about animal health, human health, pollution, but also ecosystem health. So the region experienced very rapid changes with rapid extension and intensification through access to agricultural inputs and services. It has been accompanied by increasing integration in regional and global economy, the commodification of agriculture, and indebtedness of producers. And today there is a need to accelerate the transition from conventional agrochemical-based, simplified and specialized farming system to a more diversified, complex and resilient agricultural system. And within the session, we focus specifically on agroecology, agroecological crop protection and risk-based management principle. Agroecology offers ways to transform agriculture and food system to meet these challenges through an holistic approach. And there is a need to develop action research in partnership to co-produce the knowledge and to co-design innovations adapted to the local conditions of the territory in which they are located. So the main recommendations, the first recommendation concerns the need to engage all the stakeholders to foster a safe and agroecological transition of the food system, involving farmers, local staff, private sector, service provider, but also governments. This means renewing the ways of interacting between stakeholders, promoting experience sharing and co-learning between stakeholders. It's necessary to change the paradigm and to acquire new way of thinking about change by combining capacity building programs adapted to the different stakeholders and adapted communication action. Agroecological transition strategy must be co-constructed with the diversity of stakeholders by collectively designing a diversity of agroecological innovation from the plot to the farm, but also to more broadly to the landscape level. And finally, to strengthen the adoption of this innovation by stakeholders and the change of skills, it's necessary to promote farmers' access to a diversity of seeds, plants, animal species, to also improve their access to specific and adapted equipment, services, and inputs. So what are the opportunities for increasing multilateral and multi-stakeholder collaborating for scaling up agroecological innovation? It seems necessary to define collectively and in a participatory manner innovative agroecological system following an adaptive research approach at territorial scales involving all the stakeholders. It's also essential to support the scaling up of the existing agroecological innovative in the region by removing barriers to adoption. The promotion of agroecology requires a revision of capacity building and extension program, both in academic knowledge, but also vocational training. Agroecology relies on locally adapted solutions and on the interaction between all the stakeholders. So its development implies mastery of holistic, systemic, and participatory approaches, in addition to specific and technical knowledge. In parallel, it's necessary to attract the interest of private sector in the new markets that are opening up with agroecology in order to promote virtuous agroecological system. So the public-private partnership models, such as the example of Metkasiko in Cambodia, can help build the condition of agroecological transition by expanding the extension services. Finally, it's necessary to explore institutional and financial mechanisms to encourage stakeholders to adopt agroecological practices and to develop new agroecological-based value chain to make sure to secure those who will take risk in investing for change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Melanie, for firstly re-emphasizing that there are opportunities in a transition towards agroecology for farmers, and then identifying a couple of very concrete recommendations on how this could be achieved. Several of the elements that you mentioned were also raised yesterday afternoon. So I think it's nice to see how you were able to link the discussions between the 2 days. And in fact, especially the last point that you raised around the need for financing the transition to farmers, I think links nicely to the next session. We will now hear back on climate action, monitoring, and financing. And I recall that yesterday, one of the opportunities that was identified was the potential for carbon financing as a means to support financing into an agroecological transition. So let's hear from session 2A, where we have Pascal Lienhardt and Cornelia Het as session leads. Can I ask you to please turn on your video and go online? Or on screen, rather.
Apologies for that.
No worries, I hear and see you.
Pascal, would you like me to start or will you start? Okay, you're not on a good channel. Okay, so I will start. Let me just switch, excuse me, to my presentation here. So in our session 2A, we basically had 3 parts. We had a first part with 4 presentations, and then after a short break, a second presentation looking more on financial mechanisms and landscape level initiatives, etc. And then we had also a panel discussion amongst the participants of the session. And I would just like to quickly go.
Sorry, Cornelia, do you have a presentation? We don't see the presentation.
I can share my screen.
Now we see.
The question is, what do you see? Is it acceptable for you like this?
Day 2, session 2A, which I think is not the right slide, probably.
Day 2.
If you move down, you will get to the... Right now we're seeing the presentations.
Okay, let me check. That's okay. I will just walk you quickly through through the individual takeaway messages, if that's okay for you. I cannot manage to put up the wrap-up presentation that we have put together. So if that's fine with you, I'll just quickly walk you through.
Okay, you have around 3 to 4 minutes, yeah?
Okay, so we had the first presentation by Aneta Nikolova on the topic of is 1.5 degrees within the reach for the Pacific region, Asia Pacific region. And then we had, that was the opening speech, and then we had individual presentations by Mr. Fei Chin, Dr. Tatenda Lehmann and myself, and then also by Mr. Anshuman Varma. I'll just quickly go through these so that you see what were the titles and the key messages. So first was a presentation on conservation agriculture in Cambodia. And the takeaway messages were that Cambodia has a strong commitment to go straight forward, to develop further soil resources and information, to integrate with national and international platforms. Also that exploring new business models for facilitated access to seed of cover crops and mechanization is ongoing, and that it's really important to explore financial mechanisms to support farmers in the investment into soil fertility. This was followed by a presentation of Tatenda Lehmann and myself on presenting VOCAT tools. So featuring VOCAT as a global database to document sustainable land management practices and technologies, but then also giving some insights from Cambodia and from Laos, where we were really able to embed the VOCAT documentation, but also decision-making processes into extension services. Then we had a very interesting presentation from Anshuman Varma on alternatives to rice straw burning and how different climate smart agricultural technologies can really come up to a bundle of an integrated approach. One of the key messages that I really took out from this presentation was that there's a lot of to be done still for training and capacity building. So there's not alone just the technological inputs, etc., but also an enabling environment and multi-stakeholder approaches that have to happen at a higher level. Then we went to the second part where Dr. Beria Lemona started with a very interesting presentation of integrated landscape investments for climate resilient smallholders. She presented a case study from Indonesia, and her key takeaways were that integrated landscape finance needs to address innovations, but it's still a long way to go to really bridge these initiatives at the case study level, really with the financial mechanisms and also with the policy system. This was followed by the presentation of Alan Carcenti on incentive-based instruments, and there we learned a lot about different financial mechanisms. What really struck to me, and I think also others, was this topic called feed-based bonus-malus systems for uncertified and certified products. And finally, we heard from Pierre Perron a very interesting presentation on the ground introducing farmers to carbon markets in Cambodia. So another case study of really taking an integrated approach also with private sector actors of how to trial and test to getting farmers into the carbon market, which obviously still needs to be scaled out. Just checking with Pascal if you are here now and if you would like to take over, or if I should just power through and finish the wrap up of our session. Okay, I don't hear you. In this case, I will just very briefly go into the details of our panel discussion that we had, where Dr. Beria Leimona, Ms. Aneta Nikolova, Dr. Tatenda Lehmann, and Ms. Imelda Bakuda were talking, given the opportunity to share their views on 3 questions that we had provided them in advance. So we asked about the most important challenges for monitoring and financing of climate actions. Some key takeaways from this first question were regarding the need to build trust for financial institutions. Then the other speakers were going into more the details of the second and the third question, namely, where do you see opportunities and synergies for scaling up monitoring and financing of climate actions? And what are some key messages to take to the COP26 that is happening at the moment, things that we would like to bring in from our region, which is important. And it became pretty clear also in the discussions that there is a real need to harmonize NDC commitments from the different countries. It's very hard to compare these commitments, and transparency is lacking of which different actions have which impact. There's also a need to focus more on the region. There's a lot being heard and done in Africa, but panelists felt like there's a need to bring more attention to the ASEAN region. And finally, one thing that we really discussed at length is how to come from local level pilots, tested methodologies and procedures to then really scale this up to a landscape level or the regional level, and what is the importance, or what is the role that the financial sector but also financial mechanisms could play into that. We don't have the final solutions to these questions, but we had a very interesting discussion going amongst the panelists and also some of the participants. Thank you. Pascal, if you would like to add anything, please do so. I think you had problems.
I struggled to reconnect, so I missed a part of your synthesis, but I guess you synthesize quite pretty well. What I mean, we have dense discussion, really interesting exchanges, and yeah, I think you synthesize most of it quite clearly. Thanks a lot for that, Cornelia.
Thank you very much. If I might just ask that you share your final slides with recommendations with the organizers, so that we can use them also for the final report. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Well done. Thanks, Cornelia. Thanks for stepping in. Okay, so then we move on to session 2B, the last session of today, which took up the issue on policy dialogue and processes for scaling up agroecological and safe food system innovations. We've heard several references now to scaling up throughout the previous 3 summaries. So let's hear what our session leads, Pierre Ferrand, Patrick Dakino, and Tateva Safangtong, have to say in respect to major recommendations coming out of this particular session on policy dialogue and processes for scaling up agroecological and safe food system innovations. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Katinka. I'm going to share my screen, if I manage to find the right one. Yes, up. Can you see it?
Now I can see, yes, and I can also hear you well.
Okay, very good. Okay, so this is strange because I have a green. Do you see also a green square on the? I don't know. Well, let me go ahead. So this is an attempt to summarize all what we heard this afternoon in the session 2B. This was extremely rich, and we thank very much all the speakers for all the contribution. So first of all, some key takeaway message. Let me try to move this because regarding the multi-stakeholder, I mean the importance to feed into the multi-stakeholder policy dialogue. So we have heard this already from the session 1A, but I think it's important to mention it here again. There is an increasing interest and action from the development community and the research community to find concrete ways to enter into policy dialogue and to support meaningful policy change toward agroecology and safe food system. It was also mentioned that institutionalized partnership are key to allow stakeholders, especially stakeholders from the civil society organization, to effectively contribute and influence policymaking. It was highlighted also the need for the critical need for bottom-up and inclusive approach with broad-based consultation processes. I mean, these consultation processes were mentioned several times, since they are critical to ensure that policies are addressing needs arising from stakeholders working on the ground. I'd like to quote the mantra of farmer organization, because I think it's very important to keep it in mind. So in policy making, it must be nothing about us without us. So it's really emphasizes the inclusivity and the bottom-up approach. Regarding the private sector, the barriers that were highlighted are for their involvement in agroecological practices are the different time frame, limited premium price premium, the labor intensity also of agroecological approaches, and the complexity and diversity, the scale also. It was mentioned also that the private sector work best with incentive, and there is a need to develop alternative to chemical input subsidies, for instance, because in many countries, the conventional agriculture is hugely subsidized, while there is not much for agroecology. So next slide. Oh, okay. Okay. Now from the session, so we had an introduction to present the approach of the policy dialogue in the ASEAN project, and this was defined as an experimental approach focusing on institutional mechanisms that show on-site success or learning policy stories to efficiently support agroecology and safe food system in connection with the ASEAN Lao facilitated LICA initiative. There was a very good example of on-site impact presented with the AFLI project implemented by ICRAF in Vietnam, which highlighted the policy support to develop and promote market-based agroforestry and forest rehabilitation in northern Western Vietnam. This led to 6 resolutions, 12 decisions, and 2 implementation plans. And also the LICA initiative, which is a regional initiative endorsed by ASEAN and facilitated by Lao PDR, was presented. So this is meant to establish policy dialogue on conservation agriculture and agroecology among the ASEAN member countries, with the final aim to propose ASEAN guideline for policy supporting agroecological transition. And maybe to refer to what was discussed yesterday, rather than guideline, what is really important when we talk about agroecology is more a set of principles. Additional key takeaway message regarding how we can build upon existing country policies to develop multi-sectoral, multi-tiered national and regional level intervention. So there was a good presentation on the CASIC, which has been presented also yesterday, but which highlighted this initiative from the Cambodian government that wants to achieve key country policies and strategies, especially those related to sustainable agriculture development, combating land degradation, biodiversity conservation, and climate change adaptation and mitigation. From Vietnam, we heard also how the UN Food System Summit dialogue conducted at national level led to the development of a comprehensive strategic national action plan, paving the way to sustainable and transparent food system. And finally, we also heard from the One Health approach, which it's a global approach embedding agroecology and safe food system policies, and highlighted the link between government agencies and private sector for healthy and environmental friendly agriculture transition. So now just to finish, I mean, and to open up on our conclusion, I mean, how we can move toward innovative, to maintain the innovative policy momentum, and to combine global approach and on-site experience to bridge the missing middle, which was also referred by Fergus and Claire yesterday. Okay. So first of all, it's important to boost network exchanges between on-site experience of policy support. Then to facilitate country exchanges on efficient policy frameworks. To collect, document, and share on-site experience and government framework within a common database. To promote, test, and implement regional initiatives building upon shared learning and analysis in order to move towards the elaboration of this set of principles or regional guidelines on policy to support agroecology and safe food system. So thank you very much, and thanks again to all the contributors to our session. Over to you, Dr. Katinka.
Thank you so much, Pierre, and thank you to all of you. You know, I know you had to summarize really rich discussions that took place over the entire afternoon. And it's really difficult sometimes to crystallize the most important elements out of it. But all four sessions, leads of all four sessions, have done a fabulous job really in doing that. So what will the next steps be? We will obviously prepare a report and circulate that report and then share the results also with the ASEAN Secretariat. But I think more importantly, we will internally discuss within the ASEAN project team and see how the information and the messages that were shared by the participants, have implications for our project activities and how we can adjust as required the project itself. So that now brings me really to the last part of the meeting, and that is a very big thank you to all of you. A thank you to our very distinguished officials from governments in the region, which joined us today and also yesterday and shared their national and also their project experiences. And you heard throughout the four summaries how much of that was taken up. I would like to thank the speakers from our partner organizations, the external experts that enriched the discussions today. I would like to thank the session leads from ASEAN partner organizations. I would also like to thank our Insight Pact team for so skillfully navigating us throughout the sessions today and yesterday. Thank you so much also to the interpretation team, which contributed to making sure that the messages that were generated today were widely understood. Thanks a lot to colleagues from ESCAP, and last but not least, thank you really all for your active participation. I had joined in the afternoon today and also yesterday, and was really impressed by the very rich discussions and the many experiences that were shared. So thank you all so much for this. We shall be in touch shortly with the report, and do enjoy the remainder of your day and afternoon. Thank you again.